I'm Michael Price's avatar. He's currently helping clients manage their GSA and VA contracts, and he reads every comment you leave.
Today is June 9th, and I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Welcome. I'm Michael Price, your host.
Imagine waking up, grabbing your morning coffee, just heading into work like any normal day.
Right, just a regular Tuesday.
Exactly. But then you log into your email, and you find out that the fundamental compliance rules your company has followed for like 60 years, they've just been flipped completely upside down.
Yeah, it's a massive shock to the system.
And the very frameworks you've built your entire HR infrastructure around are suddenly a massive liability. Getting it wrong could instantly cost your company its federal funding. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's a complete reversal of corporate reality, honestly. I mean, you are looking at a landscape where the old standard of compliance is now legally a violation.
Right. The stakes are totally existential. So today, our mission is to take you straight into the eye of the storm. We're unpacking this 2025 federal contracting shakeup.
The one triggered by Executive Order 14173 to be specific.
Yes, we'll clarify exactly which affirmative action requirements actually survive this order, specifically focusing on veterans and individuals with disabilities.
And we're also going to walk you through a concrete checklist on how companies are restructuring to stay out of the legal crosshairs.
Now, really quickly, whether you celebrate these recent policy changes or, completely dread them, our goal today isn't to debate the politics. We take no sides. We're simply here to read the legal map so you don't accidentally drive your company off a cliff.
And it is an incredibly complex map right now. I mean, we're talking about the end of a 60-year precedent.
60 years. Wow.
For almost 6 decades, federal contractors operated under Executive Order 11246.
Which was a cornerstone of the civil rights era, right?
Exactly. It affirmatively required certain federal contractors to maintain affirmative action programs. Whole careers, corporate cultures, and massive HR infrastructures were built around that directive.
Okay, let's unpack this, because January 2025 hits, and Executive Order 14173 is signed. And this doesn't just tweak the old rules.
No, it fundamentally revokes them entirely.
So you aren't just relieved of a requirement. The new order directs federal agencies to demand that contractors actively certify that they do not maintain any diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, programs.
Right, because it declares those initiatives inconsistent with federal anti-discrimination laws.
You literally have to sign a document swearing you don't have these programs.
You do, and that certification carries a very specific, very dangerous legal weight because the government classifies it as material.
Material meaning what exactly in this context?
In federal contracting, materiality means the statement is directly tied to the government's decision to pay you. If your certification is inaccurate, your eligibility to receive federal funds just vanishes.
Wow, which means if you falsify it, even by mistake, you trigger the False Claims Act. I've heard that described as the government's primary weapon against fraud.
It absolutely is. Think of the False Claims Act as a financial tripwire.
A tripwire, okay.
Yeah. You don't even have to intentionally defraud the government in some calculated way. Just tripping over outdated paperwork from 2 years ago that contradicts your new certification.
Up and boom, the trap goes off.
Exactly. It triggers the explosion, and the penalty is devastating. You're looking at civil penalties and treble damages.
Wait, treble damages? Like triple?
Yes. The government can fine you 3 times the amount of the actual damages they suffered, plus potential debarment from future contracting altogether.
3 times the damages could bankrupt a mid-size contractor overnight.
Oh, easily. And it gets more complicated because the enforcement doesn't just come from government auditors. We have to talk about the whistleblowers.
The qui tam lawsuits, right?
Yeah, qui tam lawsuits. These are filed by private citizens on behalf of the government. And in the corporate world, this usually means current or former employees.
That sounds incredibly risky for a company.
It creates a massive financial incentive for your own workforce to scrutinize your compliance.
So if a disgruntled HR manager knows the company certified it has no DEI programs,
but they have emails showing an active company-sponsored affinity group operating internally. Yeah, they can blow the whistle.
And if the lawsuit is successful, that employee gets a substantial cut of the financial recovery.
A very substantial cut.
That turns every internal policy manual and outdated training slide into a loaded gun. But here is the real trap. We've established that EO 14173 is a strict federal order, right?
Right? It dictates federal contract.
But it does not override state laws. And looking at the legal framework, many states and cities still legally mandate the exact affirmative action programs the federal government just banned.
And this is the crux of the crisis for multi-state firms, especially in the construction industry.
It's wild. The feds say, certify you have no affirmative action programs, or you lose federal money.
But then states like Illinois, California, New York, Wisconsin, and cities like Chicago and Minneapolis, they're still aggressively enforcing local mandates that require equal opportunity and affirmative action programs for state-funded projects.
It's like driving a commercial truck, where the federal government controls the steering wheel and the state government is slamming on the brakes.
That is a perfect analogy.
Hold on there. Segmenting sounds easy in a legal brief, but practically, how is a multi-state construction firm supposed to survive when two different bosses are giving legally binding opposite orders? Are they building two completely separate companies just to pour concrete?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yeah. The compliance guidance points to a very specific, highly disruptive solution: segmenting.
Segmenting. You mean physically and structurally separating the business operations?
Down to the core. Segmenting across different contracts or even entirely different business entities. You essentially create Company A, which only bids on federal contracts.
So Company A strictly adheres to the new federal bans on DEI, overhauls its HR,
and operates under a totally different set of corporate rules. Then you have Company B that only bids on state or local contracts in places like California, where they fully maintain the state-mandated affirmative action programs.
The overhead on that would be catastrophic. You are basically running two parallel universes within the same corporate umbrella, separate HR departments, separate recruiting strategies, just to stay legal.
It is a massive administrative and financial burden, but when the alternative is treble damages on the federal side, or losing your ability to bid on lucrative public works projects on the state side, segmenting becomes the only viable survival strategy.
Okay, so that establishes the overarching structural conflict. A federal ban on one side, state mandates on the other. But we need to pivot because the latest updates highlight a massive, highly specific exception to this new federal rule.
This is a crucial distinction for anyone trying to navigate this space. Not every affirmative action requirement was wiped out by the new order.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting. If a federal contractor has to sign a legally binding document swearing they don't have an affirmative action program, how do they legally run an outreach program for veterans without accidentally violating the ban?
Where's the line, right?
Exactly. Where's the line between illegal DEI and mandatory compliance?
To untangle that, you have to look at how these laws were created. Executive Order 14173 revoked previous executive orders.
Because the president has the authority to dictate how the executive branch manages contracts.
Precisely. But an executive order cannot override a congressional statute, and there are two major federal statutes governing employment that remain fully active.
Number one being VEVRA, the Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act.
Right. And despite the historical name, VEVRA covers several categories of protective veterans today. It strictly prohibits discrimination, but more importantly, it explicitly requires employers to take affirmative action to recruit, hire, promote, and retain these individuals.
And the second surviving statute is Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, which operates on the same logic, but focuses specifically on individuals with disabilities.
It similarly mandates affirmative action for their recruitment and retention.
So contractors are left walking an incredibly fine line. They have to reconcile a total executive ban on broad DEI programs with a strict statutory mandate to perform affirmative action for veterans and individuals with disabilities.
It's a tough spot.
What does a contractor actually have to do on the ground to prove they are following VEVRA and Section 503 without stepping on the landmine of the new executive order?
The key is understanding the operational difference between a broadly applied company-wide DEI initiative, which is now legally suspect, and highly specific statute-backed compliance tracking.
Okay.
The current guidance outlines 5 mandatory compliance processes that contractors must maintain for these two protected groups.
Let's turn those lists into a real-world scenario. Imagine an applicant walks through the door tomorrow. The first mandatory process involves self-identification.
Yes, Because of VEVRA and Section 503, you still have to hand that applicant a form asking them to self-identify as a protected veteran or an individual with a disability.
But the mechanism of how you handle that form is critical, right?
Sure, absolutely. This data is required for tracking compliance, but it must be kept entirely separate from the general application and hiring process to avoid biased claims.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, if that self-identification form happens to be printed on company letterhead that still contains outdated, generalized DEI boilerplate language, you've just created evidence that could threaten your federal certification.
A literal paperwork trap. Okay, the second process is running active outreach and recruitment efforts. You can't just passively hope veterans and disabled individuals apply.
Right, you have to actively partner with state workforce agencies or local advocacy organizations, which leads directly to the third requirement, utilization goals.
Utilization goals. I want to push back on this because utilization goal feels like a massive gray area. Under the new federal rules, quotas and demographic targets are essentially banned. How is a utilization goal legally different from a quota?
That distinction is the entire ballgame. A quota is a rigid mandate, where you must hire a certain number of people based on a specific demographic, regardless of qualifications.
Which is strictly prohibited.
Right. A utilization goal, on the other hand, is an evaluative metric. For example, Section 503 establishes a nationwide utilization goal that 7% of a contractor's workforce should be individuals with disabilities.
But what happens if you don't hit that 7%? Does the government penalize you?
No. Failing to meet the goal is not a violation in itself, and it doesn't result in fines. The legal requirement is the effort in the audit.
Ah, I see.
If you aren't hitting the goal, you are legally required to assess why your outreach isn't working and document the adjustments you are making to your recruitment strategies. The utilization goal forces you to create a federally approved paper trail,
Proving you are actively trying to recruit from these protected groups. It's about measuring the mechanism of your outreach, not forcing the final hiring outcome. That clarifies.
Exactly. Now, the fourth process involves job listing requirements. Under VEVRAA, contractors generally must list their employment openings with the appropriate state workforce agency, ensuring veterans utilizing those state services get priority access.
And finally, process 5. Every single one of those job postings needs specific required taglines. The advertisements must explicitly state that the company is an equal opportunity employer of protected veterans and individuals with disabilities.
Spot on.
So on a practical level, a contractor has to surgically remove all general DEI language from their entire corporate ecosystem while meticulously protecting these specific processes for veterans and disabilities.
Because these two conflicting sets of laws are creating a minefield, federal contractors are scrambling for a way out.
That leads us directly to how companies are actually surviving this on the ground. Because knowing the law in theory is one thing, but applying it across a sprawling corporate structure is entirely different.
Industry compliance experts are currently pushing a very rigorous survival checklist for contractors to navigate this landscape.
So what does this all mean? Let's walk through how this checklist operates in practice. Step 1. Review and revise. You have to comb through every company policy, employee handbook, and training module.
You are looking for any language that implies a banned DEI program. But if you look at the compliance guidance coming out right now, employee resource groups, or ERGs, are a massive blind spot for a lot of companies.
ERG are everywhere in major corporate structures.
They are. But overnight, a well-meaning women in engineering or minorities in leadership affinity group could be classified as an exclusionary DEI program under the new guidelines.
Suits their existing.
If an ERG limits participation or offers specific advancement opportunities based on demographics, it threatens the company's federal certification. Companies are having to aggressively audit these groups to ensure their charters guarantee equal access to all employees.
Stripping away demographic exclusivity while trying not to completely alienate their workforce. That's step 2. Step 3 on the survival guide is monitoring updates because the specific contracting clauses coming from federal agencies are constantly evolving.
You have to watch the actual ink on your new contracts. But step 4 is where the mechanics of risk management get truly intense. The guidance heavily emphasizes conducting your internal compliance analyses under attorney-client privilege.
Why is that so vital? Why can't the Chief Human Resources Officer just run an audit on the employee handbook? Why bring outside lawyers in?
Let's go back to the False Claims Act and those quid pro tem whistleblowers. If your internal HR team conducts a comprehensive audit to clean up the policies, they're going to generate a massive amount of internal documentation.
Like emails saying, we found widespread evidence of banned DEI initiatives in our regional offices.
Precisely. And if HR generates that email, it becomes discoverable evidence in a lawsuit. You've just written the plaintiff's lawsuit for them.
Oh, wow.
By conducting these audits under pro-client privilege, meaning outside legal counsel actually directs the audit and provides legal advice on the findings, you shield that investigative process from discovery.
Your legal team can identify vulnerabilities, draft the corrections, and advise leadership without creating a paper trail that a whistleblower can use against you to prove you falsely certified your compliance.
Exactly. You need legal armor while you clean house.
That is a staggering level of defensive maneuvering just to update an employee handbook. And it brings us to the final piece of the survival strategy, a rigorous focus on merit-based criteria.
To insulate the company from claims that they are maintaining hidden affirmative action programs outside of the allowed veteran and disability carve-outs, contractors are doubling down on objective, merit-based hiring and promotion.
So every job description needs to clearly define the objective skills required. Every interview rubric must be standardized.
If the government investigates, you need documented proof that every single hiring decision was tied exclusively to qualifications, eliminating any ambiguity about demographic preferences.
The documentation burden is just immense. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, diving deep into the mechanics of this new reality. Let's briefly recap this incredible high-wire act.
On one hand, companies must completely overhaul their general hiring and training materials, stripping out decades of established DEI initiatives.
And certifying under penalty of fraud that those programs no longer exist, just to maintain their federal funding.
On the other hand, if they operate in states with their own robust equal opportunity mandates, they have to physically and legally build firewalls within their own businesses,
segmenting their operations so they satisfy state laws without triggering federal False Claims Act violations.
All while actively maintaining, funding, and documenting rigorous affirmative action efforts for protected veterans and individuals with disabilities under VEVRAA and Section 503.
Constantly proving that their specific outreach efforts are distinct from the banned corporate DEI policies. It is a dizzying puzzle, which brings me to a lingering question, something that goes beyond the legal mechanics.
Yeah, this raises an important question about the human element, doesn't it? The actual workforce experiencing this shift.
Yes, think about the implications of segmenting a business. If multi-state companies are quite literally forced to physically and legally firewall their federal work from their state work, what happens to the corporate culture?
Imagine what that looks like on the ground. You have two project managers working for the same multinational construction firm.
Right.
One manages federal projects under strict, heavily audited, strictly merit-based rules, where even the mention of general diversity initiatives is a firing offense because it risks a federal contract.
And the other project manager works for the state-funded segment in Chicago or Los Angeles, operating daily under robust, state-mandated DEI frameworks, attending mandatory affirmative action seminars, and utilizing diverse supplier networks.
How does executive leadership communicate a unified company vision when the law requires them to operate with two completely opposite, legally mandated corporate philosophies?
Will we soon see completely fractured corporate identities within the exact same parent company? How does that fracture impact everyday worker morale, or their ability to transfer between divisions within their own company?
It is a profound organizational challenge that goes far beyond just signing a federal certification form. It fundamentally alters the DNA of how these businesses exist in the world.
It really does. So the next time you pour that morning coffee and head into your office, take a moment to think about the federal contractors out there right now. They woke up to find the foundational rules of their industry flipped completely upside down.
And they are spending every waking minute and millions of dollars just trying to figure out which way is up.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.